Hey guys, so we've had a couple weekends worth of regionals post-ban lists, and so as usual, I want to provide a tier list of the best hand traps and board breakers that are being played in these topping lists. Definitely a big shout out to YGOProduct.com and their top card data section. Now, as always, definitely go check out my discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles, especially those Megaton singles, because clearly trying to open them yourselves may not go very well, and also discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Sleeves and other supplies as well. As mentioned, a shout out to YGOProduct.com, but also to Ivan as always for keeping track of all of the topping decks in these regionals and other events. Anyways, let's just get to the staple tier list for this month as we approach YCS San Diego. So we do have Imperm being number 1, which is a little interesting. Usually it's like Ash, but realistically they were pretty much neck and neck. Very good in terms of effect negation, but it is kind of interesting because you're going to see that other effect negation cards like Effect Veiler, Ghost Mourner has actually fallen off, I guess because Snake Eye has actually fallen off in terms of top cut representation. Right now Yubel is taking up most of the top cut, followed by Tenpai, and if you were to combine Snake Eye and Fire King Snake Eye together, then they become third. So then you have Ash, as we mentioned, something on, I guess, Lotus. Branded has obviously really fallen off now in terms of Branded Despia at least. Because of that Branded Fusion limit, at least so far in the regional topping, I haven't seen that many of them, maybe like 1 or 2. But nonetheless, Ash is definitely, along with Imperm, one of the more generic ones. And against, most decks, you're going to be able to use it. And also against Tenpai, that's going to come up as well because they are a second most represented deck now. And speaking of Tenpai, Cosmic Cyclone, it's a little interesting because they only have 1 Sangan now. So, I mean, if you get rid of it, that's amazing, but it may not come up as much, I guess, now that they only have 1. At the same time, this is also great against Yubel. They have a lot of cards you can hit with this, and I think you can really just hit against most decks as well. And then you have Nibiru, which was a little bit surprising to me for it to be this high, but it was actually seen in a lot of the topping regional lists, which is interesting because, as I mentioned, Yubel is number 1 represented deck, and then you also have Tenpai, and Nibiru is not really great against either of those approaches, right? Because especially with like Yubel, they just make Phantom Yubel. I mean, it's like a Link 0 basically that can also negate monster effects and extend, which is a little crazy, but I don't know. I guess for now people are still playing it. It is technically good against probably most other strategies, so definitely let me know in the comments how you feel about Nibiru, at least right now, before Rage of the Abyss. And then you have Feather Duster, which you might think is just sort of straightforward in terms of being this high, but not really. In the last little while, it's actually been not guaranteed card that you would play, but at the same time, because Tenpai is also a lot more common, even more than before, and they're going to play all sorts of back row removal as well. And you know what, against like, let's say like Yubel, for example, as mentioned, like this is going to be pretty nice as well. And then Bestials in general, you do have Yubel that you can technically still hit with this, and you're also going to have something like Tenpai Dragons that are at least going to play Magnemite so that they can search any of their like dragons for their follow-up. So I think Bestials, they do still have a place right now as well. Call by the Grave, I mean, there's a lot of hand traps being played as usual. Going second, this card is also really, really strong, right? I mean, we've been talking about Tenpai a lot. I mean, hitting Heroic Seal, I'm looking at you, Tom. It really feels very good because Kwakimari Dragon that they're going to summon off seals can be very, very devastating for a lot of the top decks out there. Talent, this is usually kind of around here. I mean, there's a lot of hand traps, so really you're not going to be surprised to see this. I mean, you don't really have Appaloosa anymore that you can take, which I guess technically, is still for the better, but nonetheless, you're not going to be surprised with that. Perlia, this is it was in the same kind of section last month as well. It's not a guarantee play in everyone's list, and if they do play it, they're usually siding this card. You do have Fuaros about to come around the corner with Rage of the Abyss next month, and I'm curious to see the play of Perlia in particular once that card comes out. For example, will they decide to just all play both, and that's just like the safer thing to do? Will they only play Fuaros, or maybe Fuaros is too expensive and will people just end up only playing Perlia for a lot of decks out there? So curious to see how it's going to go. I'm not excited for when Fuaros comes, but this card is definitely quite strong on its own right now as well. And then D-Barrier, this is a card that I really hoped Konami would finally ban. I kind of talked about it in that one video I made in terms of, some of the improvements that Konami could make. And one of my complaints was that there's just some very obvious problematic generic cards that I just wish Konami would hit sooner. I know I cry about the D-Barrier all the time, but, it's just not fun. Labyrinth, I can't quite remember off the top of my head how well they're doing so far. I'll try to do a regional report soon if I have the chance. But you know what? They can still tutor this out quite easily, and they didn't get any direct hits. So that's kind of nice for them. Effect Failure, as I mentioned, those kind of targeting negation, it's still around, but you're going to see a decline, at least in the only couple weekends worth of regional so far. Ghost Mourner really fell down in play. Lightning Storm, this is kind of similar to what I talked about with Feather Duster, for example. Just like Tenpai Dragons, you know, they're going to be playing this for sure. And getting rid of like something like Caesar too is actually quite nice. And then you have Shifter. If you can play it, this is honestly the best hand trap ever. Really one of those other cards that I would say that, you know, generic problematic cards that probably should have been banned, but you know what, it is still around at 3 for us. Ritual Beasts have actually been doing very well post this ban list. At the same time, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with them with the post Rage of the Abyss, but in the meantime, you know, it is doing really well. They can play Dimension Shifter, they play well under it, and it is very strong and hard to get around for a lot of different decks out there. Moving on, we have Droll, which honestly maybe isn't too surprising. As I mentioned, Yubel and also Tenpai are the top 2 decks right now, at least so far with the first couple weekends worth of events, and Droll never has done that well against those decks. I mean, that's not actually true. Droll can be very good against Yubel. The problem I've always found is that it's not a guarantee, because maybe they just make Phantom Yubel right away, because it is, again, basically a Link 0, or they may just be able to still play around it depending on the hand, where they can like set first instead of adding, for example. And so it's kind of hit or miss. It's nice if you have it, but it's not always going to be very impactful against it, I found at least. Cross out, this is, I mean, I guess you're not expecting as many mirror matches with like Snake Eye not being tier 0 anymore, but at the same time, there are still a lot of hand traps. Who knows, maybe Tenpai Dragons, because you see D-Bears developing, seeing a lot of play, maybe they're sort of doing that cross out and siding in the D-Barrier, rather, going second as well. You have Droplet, which has been pretty popular. I think Droplet and Dark Ruler is actually, you could honestly play both in your list in terms of side or main, just because Yubel end board is incredibly scary. They are going to have potentially like Verdurus, I can't even pronounce it, on top of like, you know, like the Desiree. Really difficult. Dogwood on Dueling Book, obviously you're not going to see this being played unless you're absolutely crazy, because there's no time on DB, but in terms of topping events, you are going to see this quite a bit just because of time rules, unfortunately. And you know what, a lot of the combos nowadays take a little far too long, and this card on its own as a side deck card can actually win you games just because of those time rules. And then you have Anti-Spell Fragrance. This is another card that should have been banned. I guess it is still seeing side deck play, because might as well. It's very strong. If you draw it, and you will probably win. Phantasme has also been increasing in popularity, I've been finding, in combination with Perlia. They're kind of playing both. I guess they really want to just be able to shuffle hands, draw big hand traps, or maybe they're going with the board breaker approach. But evenly matched, I really like this card. I've been finding that it's definitely, if it can resolve, because against Yubel you do have to still go through 1 or 2 other negates, but it can really blow their field up. At the same time, you better hope that you actually have some plays of your own, because you are going to need multiple board breakers to actually get through that Yubel board. So that's the challenge I've been experiencing. I would break the board, I just can't really build enough afterwards, and then they just kind of come back really quickly, because again, Phantom Yubel for some reason didn't get hit at all. At the very least could have been hit, I don't know, maybe to 2-1, but I guess they want to kind of milk it around for a little bit longer. And Dark Ruler kind of goes hand in hand as well. I mentioned with Droplet, I think it is actually, you know, worthwhile playing both if you can, or at the very least one of the two, because Yubel boards are really scary. You also have Regeki. This is probably more so common in just sort of the Tenpai list, because they are playing like Regeki Dark Hole, just whatever multiples. It's not once per turn, so you try your best to clear the board. And then Ghost Ogre. So this one, I guess with Tenpai, because they don't have, they only have 1 Sangan summoning, maybe it doesn't come up as much overall in the meta. I know I have noticed some topping lists obviously playing this, and against Yubel it does certainly come up as well. Scale Drain, it's another one of those 1-ofs that at least it finally went back to 1. Never should have came back to 3 in the first place, but unfortunately it is still around. And then finally, just Solemn Judgment. I guess going first options, there was also a Thrust that kind of could have been tied for this spot as well, and that's been rather popular. Speaking of Thrust, unfortunately I don't think it's gotten really much cheaper since the reprint with the Megatins, because of their ratios and everything. But anyways guys, that was it for the staple tier list for this month as we approach the next YCS, the first YCS post ban list, I believe. So, you know, pretty exciting to see the results for that. Definitely a huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my patrons and sponsors as always for the continued support, and well, take care guys.